The twin sons of Kepler. 442C blazed overhead as Jake wiped the sweat from his forehead with a dirty sleeve. The mining outpost stretched before him like a collection of metal boxes scattered across the red dirt, each one humming with the constant noise of extractors pulling rare minerals from deep underground. He had been working on this frontier planet for 8 months now, fixing broken equipment and keeping the life support systems running. It was not glamorous work, but it paid well enough to send money back to his sister on Earth. Jake checked his watch and smiled. Lunch break. Finally, a moment of peace in his 12-hour shift. He walked away from the main compound toward his favorite spot, a small ridge overlooking the vast canyon that housed the primary mining operation. The view was actually quite beautiful, if you could ignore the industrial scars carved into the landscape. The red rocks reminded him of pictures he'd seen of the American Southwest back on Earth, except here the sky was a pale green color that still felt alien after all these months. He settled down on a flat boulder and opened his lunch container. Inside was the usual: a protein bar, some dried fruit, a bottle of water, and his most precious possession, a small piece of chocolate wrapped in silver foil. Real chocolate from Earth, not the synthetic stuff they made in the orbital factories. Jake had been saving it for days, waiting for the right moment to enjoy this tiny taste of home. As he unwrapped the protein bar, a sound caught his attention. It was soft, almost like a whimper, coming from somewhere below the ridge. Jake stood up and looked down toward the waste disposal area where the settlement dumped its garbage. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then movement caught his eye. A small figure was digging through one of the waste containers, moving with the desperate urgency of someone searching for food. Jake's heart clenched as he realized it was a child, but not a human child. Even from this distance, he could see the characteristic tall, thin build, and silver-colored skin of a Valari. The Valari were known throughout the sector of space as wanderers, traveling in small family groups from planet to planet, trading whatever they could find. Most humans considered them little better than space gypsies, always looking for handouts or easy money. But Jake had never actually seen one up close, especially not a child, and certainly not one alone and apparently abandoned. He watched as a small figure pulled something from the garbage and examined it carefully before tossing aside with obvious disappointment. The child's movements were becoming weaker, more desperate. Jake realized he could tell it was a girl from her delicate features, was probably starving. Without really thinking about it, Jake started climbing down the rocky slope toward the waste disposal area. He moved carefully, not wanting to frighten the child, but also concerned that she might run away before he could help. As he got closer, he could see more details that made his heart ache. The girl looked to be maybe 10 or 11 years old, though it was hard to tell with alien physiology. Her silver skin, which should have gleamed like polished metal, according to the documentaries Jake had watched, was dull and gray with dirt and malnutrition. Her large, luminous eyes, the Valari's most striking feature, were sunken and tired. She wore what had once been fine robes, but they were now torn and stained, hanging loosely on her thin frame. She looked up as Jake approached, and for a moment they stared at each other in silence. Her eyes were the color of deep blue water, and despite her obvious hunger and exhaustion, there was an intelligence there that struck Jake immediately. She did not run, but she tensed, ready to flee if necessary. "Hey, there," Jake said softly, the way he might speak to a frightened animal. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl tilted her head slightly, and Jake remembered that most Valari spoke at least some human standard language. They had to, in order to trade with the various species they encountered in their travels. "You human," she said in a small, clear voice. Her accent was musical, typical of her species, but her words were careful and hesitant. "That's right," Jake said, taking another slow step closer. "My name is Jake. What's your name?" The girl considered this question for a long moment, as if deciding whether it was safe to answer. Finally, she said, "Lyra." "Lyra, that's a pretty name." Jake crouched down so he would not tower over her so much. "Are you hungry, Lyra?" The question seemed to break something inside her. Her composure cracked, and Jake could see tears forming in those large blue eyes. She nodded, a quick, desperate movement. "When did you last eat?" Jake asked gently. 2. 3 days, Lyra whispered. Maybe more. Hard to remember. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. Not at the girl, but whatever circumstances had led to the child being abandoned and starving on this desolate planet. Where are your parents? Your family? Lyra's face crumpled. Ships attacked. Scattered. I felt a planet in escape pod. Been looking for family ships, but... She gestured helplessly at the empty sky. The story was heartbreaking, but unfortunately not uncommon in this part of space. Pirates and raiders frequently attacked Valari trading groups, knowing they carried valuable goods and had little protection. Families were often separated, left to find each other across vast distances of space. Okay, Jake said, making a decision that would change both their lives forever. First things first, you need food. He reached into his lunch container and pulled out the protein bar. Lyra's eyes widened as he handed it to her. She took it with trembling hands, tore open a wrapper, and began eating with the desperate hunger of someone who had not seen food in days. Jake watched her devour the bar in seconds, then handed her his bottle of water. Slowly, he cautioned as she started to drink. Don't make yourself sick. While she drank, Jake considered his options. He could report the girl to his supervisor, but that would likely mean she would be shipped off to one of the refugee camps in the outer systems, places notorious for their poor conditions and high mortality rates. He could try to contact Valari ships in the area, but communications were limited, and there was no guarantee her family was even still alive. Or he could do something that was probably against regulations, but felt like the right thing to do. As Lyra finished the water, Jake reached into his lunch container one more time. His fingers closed around a small piece of chocolate. His last connection to home, the treat he had been saving for a special occasion. He looked at the starving child in front of him, at her hollowed cheeks and desperate eyes, and realized this was the most special occasion he was likely to encounter. Here, he said, unwrapping the chocolate and offering it to her. This is from my home planet. It's called chocolate. It's special food. Sweet. Lyra stared at the small brown square, as if it were the most precious jewel in the galaxy. She looked up at Jake, confusion and wonder mixing in her expression. For me? She asked. For you? Jake confirmed. She took the chocolate with the same reverence she might show a religious artifact. Jake watched as she bit into it, her eyes widening as the rich, sweet flavor hit her tongue. For a moment, her face transformed. The exhaustion and fear melted away, replaced by pure joy and amazement. This is... She struggled for words in human standard. This is the most wonderful thing ever tasted. Jake smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the alien suns overhead. I'm glad you like it. They sat together in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Lyra savoring every tiny piece of the chocolate, while Jake tried to figure out what to do next. Finally, she looked up at him with those remarkable blue eyes. Why you help me? She asked. Humans not usually kind to Valari people. The question caught Jake off guard. He had not really thought about it. Helping had seemed like the natural thing to do. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe because you needed help and I was here. Lyra studied his face, as if trying to understand something fundamental about human nature. You give me your food, your special food from home. Why? Jake shrugged. Because you were hungry and I had food to share. Something in her expression shifted, became more intense. She placed one small, silver hand over her heart in what Jake would later learn was a formal Valari gesture of deep respect. I will not forget this kindness, she said solemnly. Jake helped Lyra to her feet, noting how unsteady she still was despite the food. Come on, he said. Let's get you somewhere safe where you can rest properly. He led her toward a maintenance shed he used for storing equipment, well away from the main compound where questions would be asked. As they walked, Jake found himself wondering what he had gotten himself into. Harboring an unauthorized alien was definitely against company policy, possibly against colonial law. But looking at the grateful smile on Lyra's face, he decided he would deal with those problems later. Right now, a child needed help, and Jake had never been the kind of man who could walk away from that. The maintenance shed Jake led Lyra to was small but clean, filled with spare parts and tools organized on metal shelving. Jake cleared a space in the corner and made a simple bed from some old blankets he kept for emergencies. Lyra settled onto it gratefully, her exhaustion finally catching up with her now that she had food in her stomach. "You can rest here," Jake told her. "I'll bring you more food this evening after my shift ends. But you need to stay hidden, okay? If my supervisor finds out about you, there could be trouble." Lyra nodded, already looking drowsy. "I understand. Hide until safe." Jake left her sleeping and returned to work, but he found it hard to concentrate on repairing equipment when his mind kept drifting to the young Valari girl. During his afternoon break, he managed to sneak some extra ration packs from the cafeteria, telling himself he was just being prepared for emergencies. When his shift ended, Jake hurried back to maintenance shed with a small bag of supplies. He found Lyra awake and looking much better after several hours of sleep. The color had returned to her silver skin, and her eyes were brighter and more alert. "How are you feeling?" Jake asked as he unpacked the food he had brought. "Much better," Lyra replied, her human standard already seeming clearer and more confident. "Thank you for a safe place to rest." Jake handed her a meal pack and watched as she ate more slowly this time, savoring each bite. As she ate, he studied her more carefully. There was something about the girl that seemed oddly refined despite her ragged condition, the way she held herself, the careful precision of her movements. It reminded him of the wealthy passengers he had occasionally seen passing through spaceports on their way to luxury destinations. "Tell me about your family," Jake said, settling down across from her. "What kind of work did they do?" Lyra paused in her eating, considering the question carefully. "We travel between stars," she said finally. "Trading, negotiating, helping different peoples understand each other." "That sounds important," Jake observed. "My people believe understanding between species is sacred duty," Lyra explained. "We spend generations learning languages, customs, traditions of many worlds. We carry knowledge from one place to another, help solve disputes, arrange marriages, negotiate treaties." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Treaties? That sounds like more than just trading." Lyra seemed to realize she had said more than she intended. She looked down at her food and shrugged. "All Valari learn these things. Is our way." Over the following days, Jake fell into a routine. He would visit Lyra before his shift started, bringing her breakfast and checking that she was safe. During his lunch break, he would return with more food and water, and they would talk. In the evenings, after work, he would spend an hour or two teaching her about human technology and culture while she shared stories of life among the stars. Jake quickly discovered that Lyra was remarkably intelligent. She absorbed information like a sponge, asking insightful questions and making connections that impressed him. When she showed interest in the electronic devices in his toolkit, he began teaching her basic repair techniques. She proved to have a natural talent for understanding complex systems. "Your hands are so steady," Jake commented one evening as he watched her carefully solder a connection on a damaged circuit board. "And you understand how these components work together better than some of my human colleagues." Lyra smiled shyly. "My people good with patterns, systems. We must understand many different technologies to trade with different species." "What about your family's ships?" Jake asked. "What kind of technology did they use?" Again, that careful pause. "Advanced systems," Lyra said vaguely. "But every Valari ship different, depending on family traditions and status." Jake was beginning to notice these evasive answers whenever he asked about Lyra's background. The girl was clearly more than just a daughter of simple traders, but he decided not to press too hard. Everyone had secrets, and whatever Lyra was hiding, it did not change the fact that she had needed help. 2 weeks into their arrangement, Jake's supervisor, Marcus, discovered them. Jake was showing Lyra how to calibrate an atmospheric processor when the maintenance shed door burst open. Marcus stood in the doorway, his face red with anger and shock. "What the hell is going on here, Jake?" Marcus demanded, staring at Lyra, who had frozen like a deer caught in headlights. Jake stepped protectively in front of the girl. "Marcus, I can explain." "You better start talking," because harboring an unauthorized alien is a firing offense at minimum and possibly criminal charges depending on what the colonial authorities decide. Jake took a deep breath. Her name is Lyra. She's a refugee. Her family's ship was attacked by pirates, and she crash-landed here. She's just a kid, Marcus. She was starving when I found her. Marcus looked past Jake to where Lyra sat quietly, her large blue eyes watching the confrontation with obvious fear. Some of the anger went out of his expression, replaced by concern and frustration. "Damn it, Jake," Marcus muttered. "You can't just adopt every stray you find. There are procedures, protocols. The girl needs to be processed through proper channels and sent to a refugee camp where she'll probably die." Jake shot back. "Come on, Marcus. You've seen the reports from those places. Overcrowded, undersupplied, disease-ridden. She's safer here. She's illegal here," Marcus pointed out. "If the colonial inspectors find out about this, we could all lose our jobs. The company could lose their mining contract." Lyra spoke up suddenly, her voice quiet but clear. "I can work, help with repairs. I learn fast, not be burdened." Both men looked at her in surprise. She had been silent during most of the argument, but now she stood up with dignity that seemed far beyond her apparent age. "I know I bring danger to you," she continued, addressing Marcus directly, "but I have nowhere else to go. Family ships scattered, maybe destroyed. If you help me now, I promise someday I repay kindness." There was something in her tone, a quiet authority that made Marcus pause. He studied the girl's face, taking in her obvious intelligence and the strange, almost regal way she carried herself. "What exactly did your family do?" Marcus asked suspiciously. "You're pretty articulate for a trader's kid." Lyra exchanged a quick glance with Jake. "My family had important position among our people. We carried great responsibility for maintaining peace between different groups. Diplomats," Marcus pressed. "Something like that." Lyra admitted reluctantly. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering. Finally, he sighed heavily. "Okay, here's the deal. She can stay, but she works. I'll list her as a temporary maintenance assistant, paid in room and board. If anyone asks official questions, we found her papers in order and hired her through proper channels. But if this comes back to bite us, Jake, it's your ass on the line." Jake felt relief wash over him. "Thanks, Marcus. I owe you one." "You owe me about a dozen," Marcus grumbled, but he was already looking at Lyra with a kind expression. "Can you really do repair work, kid?" In response, Lyra picked up the circuit board she had been working on and showed him the perfect soldering job she had completed. Marcus examined it closely, clearly impressed despite himself. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "That's better work than half my certified technicians can do." Over the following weeks, Lyra proved to be an invaluable addition to the maintenance team. She had an intuitive understanding of complex systems and could diagnose problems faster than anyone expected. She also demonstrated an impressive knowledge of star charts and navigation systems, often pointing out more efficient routes for supply ships or suggesting better orbital patterns for the mining satellites. "Where exactly did you learn all this?" Jake asked one evening, as they worked together on a particularly stubborn communications relay. Lyra was quiet for a moment, her attention focused on the delicate components in front of her. "My family traveled much," she said finally. "Saw many different technologies, many different worlds. Children learn by watching, by doing." Jake sensed there was more to the story, but he had learned not to push too hard. Whatever secrets Lyra was keeping, he trusted that she would share them when she was ready. For now, he was content to enjoy their growing friendship and watch her blossom in the safety and stability he had provided. He had no idea that their quiet life was about to be shattered by the arrival of forces beyond anything he could have imagined. The first sign of trouble came at dawn on a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after Jake had first found Lyra digging to the waste disposal area. He was performing his routine equipment checks when Marcus burst into maintenance bay, his face pale with shock and his hands shaking as he gripped a data pad. "Jake, we got a problem," Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "A big problem." Jake looked up from the atmospheric processor he had been calibrating. What kind of problem? The kind that involves a massive alien fleet that just dropped out of hyperspace and is currently surrounding our planet. Marcus replied grimly. Jake felt his blood run cold. What kind of fleet? Valari, Marcus said, watching Jake's face carefully. About 50 ships, ranging from destroyers to something that looks like a dreadnought. They're not responding to standard communication protocols, and they've deployed what appears to be a full military blockade. Jake's mind immediately went to Lyra, who was currently in the maintenance shed organizing spare parts. A Valari fleet could mean her family had found her, but the military deployment suggested something much more serious than a simple rescue mission. Had they made any demands? Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Marcus nodded grimly. That's the really interesting part. They're demanding the immediate return of someone they're calling Crown Princess Lyra Thani. Ring any bells? Jake felt the world tilt around him. Crown Princess. The quiet, intelligent girl he had been teaching to repair circuit boards was royalty. Not just any royalty, based on the size of the fleet surrounding their planet. She was very important royalty indeed. Where is she? Marcus demanded. Because right now, Colonial Command is about 3 minutes away from declaring a system-wide emergency, and when they start asking questions about why a Valari princess ended up on a backwater mining planet, I have a feeling our little arrangement is going to come under some very uncomfortable scrutiny. Jake ran his hand through his hair, his mind racing. I need to talk to her. She deserves to know what's happening before we turn her over to anyone. Jake, we don't have time for her. 5 minutes, Jake interrupted. Give me 5 minutes to explain the situation to her. She's just a kid, Marcus. Whatever's going on, she's still just a kid who's been through hell. Marcus looked at his datapad, where incoming messages from Colonial Command were piling up with increasing urgency. Finally, he nodded. 5 minutes. Then we all go up to the command center together. Jake hurried to the maintenance shed, his heart pounding. He found Lyra exactly where he'd left her, carefully sorting electronic components into labeled containers. She looked up with a bright smile when he entered, but her expression quickly changed when she saw his face. What is wrong? She asked, setting down the components and giving him her full attention. Jake sat down across from her, trying to figure out how to begin. Lyra, there's something I need to tell you. A Valari fleet has arrived in the system. They're looking for someone. Lyra went very still. Who are they looking for? Crown Princess Lyra Thani, Jake said quietly, watching her face. For a moment, Lyra said nothing. Then, slowly, her carefully maintained disguise fell away. The way she held herself changed, her posture becoming unmistakably regal. When she looked up at Jake, her eyes held a depth of authority and responsibility that seemed impossible in someone so young. How many ships? She asked, and now her voice carried a clear, commanding tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. 50, including what looks like a dreadnought. Lyra closed her eyes briefly. The Royal Guard. They found me. Jake leaned forward. Lyra, I need to understand what's happening here. Who are you, really? The girl. No. Jake realized the princess looked at him with an expression of deep sadness and regret. I am Lyra Thani, heir to the Valari throne, daughter of Queen Silamari, and next in line to rule over the Valari Star Nation. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. The Valari Star Nation was one of the major powers in this sector of space, controlling trade routes that connected dozens of systems. He had been teaching the future ruler of a galactic civilization how to solder circuit boards. The ship that was attacked, Jake said slowly, pieces falling into place. That wasn't a trading vessel, was it? It was my ceremonial pilgrimage ship, Lyra admitted. When a Valari royal comes of age, they must journey to the sacred world alone to prove their worthiness to lead. It is tradition stretching back thousands of years. But raiders attacked us near the edge of Terran space. My guards died defending me, and I barely escaped in a damaged pod. Jake stared at her, trying to reconcile this revelation with a hungry, frightened child he had found 6 weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Because I was not sure I could trust you, Lyra said honestly. Humans in Valari have complicated history. Many humans see us as weak, as beggars wandering between the stars. They do not understand that our wandering is chosen, that we are the guardians of ancient knowledge and keepers of peace between species. And if I had known you were a princess, Lyra smiled sadly, you would have treated me differently, with fear or greed or false respect. But you treated me as just, Lyra, a hungry child who needed help. That meant more to me than you can possibly understand. Jake felt a mix of emotions, betrayal, confusion, and oddly, a kind of pride. So what happens now? Before Lyra could answer, Marcus appeared in the doorway of the shed. Time's up, he said tersely. Colonial Command wants all three of us in the main conference room immediately. And Jake, there's some very unhappy Valari diplomats waiting for us. The walk to the command center felt like the longest of Jake's life. Lyra walked between him and Marcus, her posture now unmistakably royal despite her simple work clothes. Other workers stared as they passed, sensing that something momentous was happening even if they did not understand what. The conference room was crowded with people Jake had never seen before. Colonial officials, military officers, and 3 Valari in elaborate robes who radiated authority and barely contained anger. The central figure was tall even by Valari standards, with ceremonial scars on his silver skin and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Commander Thane, Lyra said formally, inclining her head in a gesture of respect. The Valari commander's stern expression softened slightly when he saw her, but his voice remained hard. Your Highness, the entire Royal Guard has been searching for you for 6 weeks. Your mother fears the worst. I am unharmed, Lyra replied with dignity, thanks to the kindness of humans who asked nothing in return for their help. Commander Thane's gaze shifted to Jake, and Jake felt as if he were being examined by a predator deciding whether he was threat or prey. This is the human who found you? This is Jake, Lyra said, and something in her tone made everyone in the room pay attention. He gave me his last piece of chocolate when I was starving. He shared his food, provided shelter, and asked nothing in return. He treated me with kindness when he could have ignored my suffering or turned me over to authorities for processing. The commander studied Jake for a long moment. Finally, he spoke directly to him. Human Jake, you have provided aid to the heir of the Valari throne. This creates obligations. Jake found his voice. I didn't know who she was. I just saw a hungry kid who needed help. Yes, Commander Thane said, and for the first time, his expression showed something that might have been approval. That is exactly why your actions have meaning. One of the colonial officials, a nervous man with thinning hair, stepped forward. Commander, we had no knowledge that the princess was on our planet. If we had known, you would have treated her as a political asset, Commander Thane interrupted. Something to be bargained with or used for advantage. But this human treated her as a person deserving of compassion. There is a difference. Jake felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him. What happens now? He asked. Princess Lyra looked at him, then at the assembled officials, and Jake saw her make a decision that would change everything. Now, she said in a voice that carried absolute authority despite her youth, we discuss how this act of kindness between individuals can become the foundation for something much larger between our peoples. Part 4. Diplomatic Consequences. The tension in the conference room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake stood awkwardly between colonial officials and the Valari delegation, feeling completely out of his depth as Princess Lyra spoke with the calm authority of someone born to rule. Commander Thane, she said, addressing the stern Valari military leader, I propose we use this situation to open formal diplomatic relations with the human colonies. My experience here has shown me that humans possess qualities my people value greatly. The colonial administrator, a sweating man named Director Hayes, stepped forward nervously. Your Highness, we would be honored to discuss any diplomatic arrangements, but surely this matter should be handled through proper galactic channels. Proper channels? Commander Thane interrupted, his voice cold as space. You mean the same channels that have consistently undervalued Valari capabilities and dismissed us as wandering traitors for the past century? Jake watched the exchange with growing confusion. He was beginning to understand that there was much more going on here than just the rescue of a lost princess. The way Commander Thane spoke and the obvious military power of the fleet surrounding the planet. suggested that the galaxy's understanding of the Valari was dangerously incomplete. Princess Lyra seemed to sense his confusion. "Jake," she said, turning to him with gentle expression, "there are things about my people that most humans do not understand. We have allowed others to see us as wanderers and traitors because it served our purposes. But the truth is more complex." "What kind of truth?" Jake asked. Commander Thane answered him. "The Valari Star Nation controls trade routes connecting over 200 star systems. Our wandering fleets maintain peace treaties between dozens of species. We possess technologies that other civilizations can only dream of. We have allowed ourselves to be underestimated because it gives us advantages in negotiations." Director Hayes looked like he was about to faint. "You mean all this time when we thought the Valari were just minor traders? We were actually one of the major powers in this entire sector space," Princess Lyra confirmed. "Our people decided long ago that it was safer to be seen as harmless wanderers than as a potential threat to other civilizations." The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. He had been sharing his lunch with one of the most important people in known space, teaching her basic electronics, while she probably had access to technology that would make human science look primitive. Before anyone could respond, the door to the conference room burst open. A breathless communications officer stumbled in, carrying a data pad with obvious urgency. "Director Hayes, sir," the officer gasped. "We're receiving priority communications from Sector Command, the Galactic Trade Consortium, and the Earth Colonial Council is requesting immediate updates on the situation." Director Hayes took the datapad with shaking hands. As he read the messages, his face grew progressively paler. "The Trade Consortium is dispatching their top negotiator. Ambassador Reed will arrive within 12 hours. And Earth Colonial Council they're very concerned about potential trade implications." Jake felt a growing sense of unease. "What does that mean?" Marcus, who had been silent throughout the meeting, spoke up grimly. "It means this has just become much bigger than a simple rescue operation. If the Valari really control major trade routes, then this situation could affect commerce throughout the sector." Princess Lyra nodded sadly. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. Now everything becomes about politics and trade advantages, and the simple human kindness that brought us together gets lost in negotiations." Commander Thane placed a protective hand on the princess's shoulder. "Your Highness, perhaps it would be best if we simply collected you and departed. These complications serve no purpose." "No," Lyra said firmly, surprising everyone in the room. "This is exactly why these discussions are necessary. Look how quickly everything changed when people learned who I was. Jake treated me with kindness when he thought I was just a lost refugee. That teaches us something important about his character, and possibly about human nature in general." Jake felt embarrassed by the attention. "I just did what anyone should do. I saw someone who needed help." "But you did not do it for reward or recognition," Princess Lyra pointed out. "You did it because you believed it was right. That is rare, Jake, rarer than you might think." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The mining outpost was transformed into an impromptu diplomatic center as various officials arrived from across the sector. Jake found himself moved to a secure quarters under something that was not quite arrest, but was definitely protective custody. Marcus visited him in the evening, bringing dinner and an update on the rapidly developing situation. "This is insane, Jake," Marcus said, settling into a chair across from his friend. "There are ships arriving every few hours. The Trade Consortium sent not just Ambassador Reed, but an entire diplomatic team. 3 different news services are requesting interviews, and the Valari fleet has been joined by what our sensors are calling additional units of unknown configuration." Jake pushed his food around on his plate, having lost most of his appetite. "How is Princess Lyra doing?" "She's been in meetings all day with Commander Thane and her own advisors," Marcus replied. "But she asked about you several times. I think she's worried about how all this is affecting you." That evening, Jake was surprised when Princess Lyra herself came to visit him, accompanied by 2 Valari guards who waited respectfully outside his quarters. "Hello, Jake," she said. And despite everything that had changed, her smile was the same warm expression he remembered from their quiet conversations in the maintenance shed. "Your Highness," Jake said awkwardly, not sure of the proper protocol. Lyra laughed, a sound that reminded him of wind chimes. "Please, just Lyra, at least between us." She sat down across from him, and for a moment it felt like they were back in the maintenance shed, sharing stories and working on a repair project together. "I wanted to apologize," Lyra said seriously. "My presence here has disrupted your entire life, and that was never my intention." Jake shook his head. "You don't need to apologize for being who you are. I'm just sorry I couldn't protect you from all this political mess." "You did protect me," Lyra insisted. "For 6 weeks, you gave me something I had never experienced before, being treated as just a person, not as a princess or a political symbol. That was a gift beyond price." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Jake asked, "What happens now? Are you going back to your people?" Lyra's expression became thoughtful. "That depends partly on what Ambassador Reed proposes when he arrives tomorrow, and partly on what my mother decides when she reviews the situation. But, Jake, I want you to know that whatever happens, I intend to honor the debt I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," Jake protested. "I owe you everything," Lyra corrected gently. "And more importantly, this situation has made me realize something important about the relationship between our peoples. Humans and Valari have much to offer each other, but we have never had the chance to build trust based on genuine friendship rather than political necessity." Before Jake could ask what she meant, one of the guards appeared in the doorway. "Your Highness, Commander Thane requests your presence for the evening briefing." Lyra stood gracefully. "I will see you tomorrow, Jake. And remember, no matter what happens in these negotiations, you will always be my friend." After she left, Jake sat alone in his quarters, trying to process everything that had happened. 6 weeks ago, he had been a simple maintenance worker whose biggest concern was fixing broken equipment and counting the days until his contract ended. Now he was somehow at the center of interstellar diplomatic negotiations that could reshape relations between major galactic powers. The irony was not lost on him. All of this had started because he had shared a piece of chocolate with a hungry child. He wondered if his sister back on Earth would believe the story when he eventually had a chance to tell her. Outside his window, Jake could see the lights of ships in orbit, a constant reminder that the quiet life of the mining outpost was gone forever. Whatever happened next, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Jake's last thought was of Lyra's words about friendship and trust. He hoped that somehow, despite all the politics and complications, that friendship would survive what was coming. Tomorrow would bring Ambassador Reed, formal negotiations, and decisions that would affect millions of lives across dozens of star systems. But tonight, Jake held on to the memory of a young girl's grateful smile when it offered her his last piece of chocolate, and the quiet pride he felt in knowing he had done the right thing when it mattered most. Ambassador Reed arrived at dawn in a sleek diplomatic vessel that made the mining outpost utilitarian buildings look even more shabby by comparison. Jake watched from his quarters as the ambassador's entourage disembarked. A dozen officials in crisp uniforms, carrying briefcases full of legal documents and trade agreements. Within an hour, the main conference room had been transformed into a formal negotiating chamber, complete with translation equipment and recording devices. Jake was escorted there by 2 colonial guards, still not sure whether he was a witness, a participant, or something in between. Princess Lyra was already seated at the polished conference table, wearing formal Valari robes that made her look older and more regal than Jake had ever seen her. But when she spotted him entering the room, she gave him a small, reassuring smile that reminded him of the girl who had shared stories with him during lunch breaks. Ambassador Reed was a tall, thin man with sharp eyes and the kind of confident demeanor that came from years of high-stakes negotiations. He stood as Jake approached, extending his hand in greeting. "You must be Jake," Reed said, shaking hands firmly. "The man whose kindness has created quite a diplomatic opportunity for all of us." Jake felt uncomfortable with the description. "I just helped a kid who needed food. I never intended to create anything diplomatic. Sometimes the most important changes begin with the simplest actions, Princess Lyra observed from her seat at the table. That is exactly why the situation is so significant. Commander Thane, who had been conferring quietly with other Valari officials, turned to address the room. Before we begin formal negotiations, there is something the human delegation needs to understand about the current balance of power in this sector. He activated a holographic display that filled the center of the room with a three-dimensional map of local star systems. Jake gasped as he saw the true extent of Valari influence. Trade routes that connected hundreds of worlds, strategic positions that controlled access to entire regions of space, and military installations that had been disguised as simple trading posts. For 3 centuries, Commander Thane explained, the Valari have maintained peace and stability throughout this region by allowing others to underestimate our capabilities. We have prevented at least a dozen major wars through quiet diplomacy, and our trade networks have brought prosperity to species that might otherwise have remained isolated. Ambassador Reed studied the display with obvious surprise and growing respect. This changes our understanding of the situation considerably. The Trade Consortium had no idea of the true scope of Valari operations. That was intentional, Princess Lyra said. My people learned long ago that being seen as powerful often leads to conflict. It is easier to maintain peace when others think of you as harmless wanderers rather than as potential threats. Director Hayes, the colonial administrator, leaned forward nervously. But why reveal all this now? What changed? Princess Lyra looked directly at Jake. What changed is that I experienced something during my time here that made me reconsider our entire approach to interspecies relations. I was helped by someone who asked nothing in return, who treated me with kindness despite having no idea who I was or what advantages such treatment might bring him. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I still don't understand why that matters so much. Because it demonstrates something we have rarely seen in galactic politics, Commander Thane explained. Genuine altruism, the willingness to help others without expectation of reward. Such character is precious, and it suggests that humanity might be ready for a different kind of relationship with the Valari. Ambassador Reed was taking notes rapidly. What kind of relationship are you proposing? Princess Lyra stood, and despite her youth, everyone in the room immediately gave her their full attention. I propose a formal alliance between the Valari Star Nation and the human colonies, based not on political necessity or trade advantages, but on mutual respect and shared values. The silence that followed was profound. Jake could hear his own heartbeat as the implications of her words sank in. Such an alliance would provide humans with access to technologies and trade routes that could advance your civilization by decades, Commander Thane added. In return, we would gain something with long value but rarely found, genuine friendship between species. Ambassador Reed set down his pen and looked carefully around the room. This is unprecedented. An alliance of this magnitude would require approval from the highest levels of both governments. Of course, Princess Lyra agreed, but I have already been in communication with my mother, Queen Silamari. She is intrigued by the possibility, especially after I told her about Jake's actions and what they represent about human nature. Jake finally found his voice. I'm still just a maintenance worker. I don't understand how anything I did could lead to something this big. Princess Lyra turned to face him fully. Jake, you gave your last piece of chocolate to a stranger because she was hungry. You shared your food with someone different from yourself, asked no questions about her background, and expected nothing in return. You treated her with dignity and kindness when you could have easily ignored her suffering. She paused, and Jake saw tears forming in her large blue eyes. That simple act of compassion showed me something beautiful about humanity that I had never experienced before. If humans are capable of such selfless kindness, then they are worthy of friendship with the Valari. And if such friendship is possible, then perhaps we can build something better than the political alliances based on fear and mutual advantage that have dominated galactic relations for so long. Over the following days, the negotiations took on a momentum of their own. Teams of experts from both species worked around the clock, drafting treaties, establishing trade protocols, and creating frameworks for cultural exchange. Jake found himself surprisingly busy, as both sides wanted to interview him repeatedly about his motivations and experiences with Princess Lyra. But it was the quiet moments that mattered most to Jake. Conversations with Lyra during breaks in the negotiations, walks around the perimeter of the mining outpost where they could talk without being overheard by diplomats and reporters. Do you ever regret it? Jake asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the alien sky in shades of purple and gold. Regret what? Lyra replied, revealing who you really are. Your people kept their true capabilities secret for centuries. Now everyone knows. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes secrets become more of a burden than a protection, she said finally. My people have been alone for so long, carrying the responsibility of maintaining peace without being able to share that burden with true allies. Perhaps it is time to try a different approach. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed joint human-Valari diplomatic station that had replaced the simple mining outpost. The facility was a marvel of combined technologies, with sleek Valari designs integrated seamlessly with practical human engineering. He was no longer a maintenance worker, though he still insisted he was more comfortable with tools than with diplomatic protocols. His official title was Cultural Liaison, a position that had been created specifically for him after both governments recognized the unique role he had played in bringing their peoples together. Princess Lyra, now formally recognized as the Valari Royal Ambassador to humanity, found him there as she often did when she visited the station. The first joint exploration mission launches tomorrow, she told him, settling beside him at the observation window. 3 human ships and 3 Valari vessels, working together to map unexplored regions beyond the Outer Rim. Jake watched the mixed fleet of ships in orbit above them, still amazed by how much had changed. Your chocolate imports are really taking off, too, he observed with a smile. Lyra laughed, the same musical sound he remembered from their first meeting. Chocolate has become extremely popular among my people. Some of the Valari nobles are paying incredible prices for genuine Earth chocolate. My mother says it is the most successful cultural exchange in our history. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching human and Valari crews working side by side on the ships that would carry their joint missions to the stars. Jake, Lyra said quietly, do you remember what I told you that first day when you gave me your chocolate? You said you would not forget my kindness, Jake recalled. I said I would not forget, and I promised that someday I would repay it. Lyra gestured toward the bustling station around them, the mixed crews, the ships preparing for joint missions of exploration and discovery. This is my attempt at repayment. Jake shook his head. You don't owe me anything. And besides, this is so much bigger than what I did. No, Lyra said firmly. This all started because you were willing to share your last piece of chocolate with a hungry stranger. Every alliance begins with a single act of trust. Every friendship with a moment of kindness. What you did was small, but it was also everything. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus appeared on the observation deck, carrying a small package wrapped in familiar silver foil. Thought you might want this, Marcus said, handing the package to Jake with a grin. First shipment of Earth chocolate arrived this morning. Ambassador Lyra put in a special request to make sure you got the first piece. Jake unwrapped the chocolate, breaking into pieces as he had learned to do during their early days together. He offered half to Lyra, just as he had that first day when she had been a hungry child digging through garbage. She accepted it with the same sense of wonder she had shown 6 months earlier, and for a moment, they were just Jake and Lyra again, friends sharing a simple pleasure and enjoying each other's company. Around them, the diplomatic station buzzed with activity as humans and Valari worked together to build a future neither species could have achieved alone. And it had all started with a maintenance worker who chose to share his lunch with a stranger because it was the right thing to do. Sometimes, Jake reflected as he watched the joint fleet prepare for departure, the most important changes really did begin with the smallest acts of kindness.